Hello. Today I want to talk about diagramming participles and participial phrases. Participles are different from other words we've been diagramming so far, and I think you can probably figure out why. They are adjectives, modifiers. If you were diagramming them, you might want to put them on a diagonal line below the noun or pronoun that they modify. However, they are also verbals. They can have complements and modifiers of their own. For that reason, you might want to put them on a horizontal line. Well, to diagram participles, we do both. To diagram a participle, we begin with a diagonal extending down from the word it modifies, just as we would with an adjective. Then we extend the diagonal horizontally, just as we would with a verb. The word itself actually curves or makes an arc on the diagram. So if this word participle modifying the noun or pronoun would go diagonally down and then horizontally across, and the participle kind of sits on both parts of the line. Okay, here's a simple example. One you might remember from previous lesson. Jesus is the risen Lord. Okay, risen is a participle. It modifies Lord. So we put risen on a diagonal and a horizontal. It curves around on both parts of the line under the word Lord that it modifies. And of course, you do recall that Lord is a predicate nominative, so that is why we have the diagonal between the linking verb and the predicate nominative. The, of course, also modifies Lord. Leave that up just for a few seconds so you can take a look at it. Here are two more that you may remember. Beaten beyond recognition by the robbers, the man was left on the Jericho road. Again, was left is the verb, man is the subject, the modifies man, but then also we have the participial phrase modifying man. So we have beaten, modifying man, and then beyond recognition, of course, is the prepositional phrase modifying beaten, and by the robbers, another prepositional phrase modifying beaten. Notice both those words modify beaten, they're part of the whole participial phrase, but they're individual prepositional phrases themselves. And then on the Jericho road modifies left, answers the adverbial question where he was left. If you were to diagram this and you wrote Jericho road, both on the horizontal line, as though that were the name of the road, I mean, that's fine. I wouldn't mark you off for that if you did it that way. Okay. Here's another one you may be familiar with. On the 4th day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 4 calling birds. Okay. Works the same for the present participle. Participles are diagrammed the same, whether they're present participles or past participles. So, again, gave is the verb. Love is the subject. My true modified love. Gave what? Gave birds. Birds is the direct object, so you have the vertical line there. Okay, on the 4th day of Christmas modifies the verb, if you think about it. It answers the question when. It's not that the true love was the 4th day of Christmas love, but the gift was given on that 4th day. So on day, on is the preposition, day is the object of preposition, and then of Christmas, another prepositional phrase modifying day, which day? Day of Christmas, 4th day of Christmas. And then to me also modifies gave, who was it given to? Given to me, so me is the object of the preposition to. And then finally birds, the direct object for birds, and then calling. And calling, obviously they're a present participle modifying birds, so it is written on that diagonal plus horizontal preposition line. I'm sorry, participle line. I'll let you look at that for a couple of seconds. Okay. Now, since participles are verbals and they can have complements, the complements of the participle go after the participle on the horizontal line. The same kind of line separates the complement that would separate it if the verbal were part of a sentence. So, just as if you have a verb, you have that vertical line that meets but does not cross the main line, followed by a direct object. So on participle, after the participle, on the same line the participle is on, if the participle has a direct object, you would have that same vertical line followed by the direct object. So, here we have another sentence you might be familiar with. Paying no attention to his disciples' objections, Jesus headed for Jerusalem. Now we see headed is the main verb. Who or what headed? Jesus headed. Okay, for Jerusalem is the prepositional phrase modifying headed. Answers the question where. Okay, so for on the diagonal, Jerusalem, the object of the preposition on the horizontal. But then here, paying no attention to his disciples' objections is a participial phrase. Okay. Paying, the participle, is on the diagonal plus the horizontal. And then we have the vertical line separating attention. Paying what? Paying attention. So attention is the direct object of the participle. In this case, there is a no there, significant no modifying attention. So, and then to his disciples' objections also is a prepositional phrase modifying attention. So objections is the object of the preposition to. Disciples modifies objections. And his, if you think about it, his really modifies disciples. It doesn't modify objections. It's not his objections, it's his disciples' objections. So we put the his out, parallel to the modifier that it modifies. Okay, I'll leave that up for a minute, but notice here, the direct object of paying, diagrammed as though it was the direct object of a verb. In this case, the direct object of the participle, of the verbal. Okay, if the participle were followed by a predicate adjective or predicate nominative, there would be a diagonal ending at the horizontal line separating them. So we have the verb followed by a predicate adjective or predicate nominative, then we have a diagonal. So it's that way with the participle. We have the participle on the diagonal plus the horizontal. On the horizontal we have another diagonal, shorter diagonal, followed by the predicate adjective or predicate nominative. Okay, so appearing wise beyond his years, Jesus carried on a conversation with the temple elders. Appearing wise beyond his years is a participial phrase modifying Jesus. So here we have the diagram. The verb is carried. Jesus is the one doing the carrying. In this case, the way I think it's usually diagrammed is he carried what? Carried a conversation. On, if you think about it, on is really, in this sentence, just an adverb. Because we can carry or we can carry on. Okay, it means something a little bit different. It's kind of equivalent to carry on word. However, if you did diagram conversation as the object of the preposition on, I probably wouldn't mark you off for it, even though I really think this is a better way of doing it. Because we can delete the on from the sentence and it still makes sense. We could say he carried a conversation with the elders, and it says pretty much the same thing. Okay, so anyway, conversation, A modifies conversation, prepositional phrase modifying conversation with elders, direct object, object of preposition with, and the and temple both modify the elders. But then, let's take a look at this participial phrase. appearing is a participle, but in this case it is a linking verb, it's not an action verb, and so wise is the predicate adjective of appearing. You know, Jesus appeared wise, or Jesus was appearing wise. So in this case we would have the diagonal line separating the participle from the predicate adjective. Of course, it would be the same for a predicate nominative as well. And then beyond his years modifies wise is the prepositional phrase modifying wise. Beyond the preposition years, the object of the preposition is modifying years. So, but again, look at this construction when you have a prepositional phrase with a predicate adjective or a predicate nominative of a participial phrase with a predicate adjective or predicate nominative of the participle. I've done that a couple of times, haven't I? Say participle when I mean preposition, preposition when I mean participle. Hopefully I've caught myself. They do sound alike though. Okay. So, here, wise is the predicate adjective following appearing, which makes it a linking verb, as we said. Okay. Here's a slight variation of the sentence. And in this case, the participle has both a direct object and indirect object. But again, indirect objects, diagrammed same way they would if they were diagrammed with a verb. So if we said, paying his disciples no attention, Jesus headed for Jerusalem. In this case, attention, of course, is still a direct object, paying what? But in this case, disciples is not part of a prepositional phrase. It's by itself. It's the indirect object. So, you know, say indirect object is what receives the direct object. So the disciples receive no attention. So in this case, you know, most of the sentence is similar, but okay, paying attention. Okay, it's vertical line because it's a direct object. No modifies attention, but his disciples is the indirect object, so that goes under the horizontal, under the participle, not under the direct object. And of course, there's no word on the diagonal, and then the indirect object is on the horizontal. And his modifies disciples. Again, not real common, but you know, it is possible to have you know, a participial phrase with an indirect object. It is also even possible, again, it's pretty rare, but it's even possible to have an object complement. I'm not going to necessarily show a diagram of that. Hopefully by now you can figure out how those things would be done. Okay, remember nominative absolutes. Nominative absolutes are a little tricky. They are noun phrases with a participle modifying the noun, and those noun phrases do not have a grammatical relationship with the rest of the sentence. Okay, we studied those when we looked originally at participial phrases. Now, if you recall, we have diagrammed other things that have had no relationship with the rest of the sentence, namely interjections and direct addresses. Just as interjections and direct addresses are placed on a line parallel to the subject and above the subject, so the noun in the nominative absolute is placed above the subject the same way. So here you have an example. If we have an interjection, wow, that looks great. Okay, the interjection goes above the subject. Remember that? Okay, let's have just that sentence. Wow, that looks great. Okay, simple sentence with an interjection. Okay. Okay, that is the subject. Looks is the verb. Great is the predicate adjective. And then wow, we don't really have enough room for it. Wow would go above the subject on a separate line that is not, erase that, show that it's not I tell you what, let me just erase this whole thing. Okay, there we go. That makes it better. Okay. And then Remember that. And it's the same for direct addresses. If the sentence were John, that looks great. Same thing. John would go on that line. Well, we do the same thing with nominative absolutes. And the noun, since nouns virtually always go on a horizontal line, the noun of the nominative absolute goes on a horizontal line above the subject the same way. And so then the participle or participial phrase modifying the noun is diagrammed under the noun the same way participles, and it shouldn't say participles, not prepositions, sorry about that, the way participles would be diagrammed anywhere else. Okay, I even got confused when I was writing it. All right, so let me give you an example. His work being done, Jesus ascended to heaven. Again, you may remember that sentence from an earlier exercise. Okay, main sentence, ascended is the verb, Jesus is the subject, to heaven modifies ascended, prepositional phrase telling where he ascended to. Okay, and then his work being done is a nominative absolute. It doesn't really have a grammatical relationship with the rest of the sentence, and the noun, that's why it's a nominative absolute. Nominative means noun. The noun goes on the horizontal line, work. Okay, and then his modifies work, and being done is the participial phrase. I guess what some places call the perfect participle. So being done, maybe call it passive participle, but anyway, goes on the diagonal, horizontal, the way participles do. So, that would be an example of a nominative absolute diagram. Okay, here's a second one. Jesus stopped, his power having gone out of him. Remember, nominative absolutes usually at the beginning of a sentence, but not always. So in this case, the nominative absolute is at the end. Jesus stopped is the main sentence. That's the verb is stopped. Jesus is the subject, and then his power having gone out of him. Power, of course, is the noun of the nominative absolute. His modifies power, and then having gone is the participial phrase. Again, on the diagonal plus the horizontal, and then out of him is a prepositional phrase modifying have gone, or having gone. Remember too, out of really, if you think about it, out of is a compound preposition. There are a few of those in English. Okay, so to review, very simply, participles are diagrammed on a diagonal line with a horizontal extension to the left under the noun or pronoun they modify. If the participle is a part of the participial phrase, the words or phrases modifying the participle are diagrammed in the normal manner. If the participle in the participial phrase has a complement, the complement is diagrammed in the usual way as though the participle were a verb. The main noun in a nominative absolute is placed on a horizontal line above the subject, parallel to the subject line. Any participles, participial phrases, or other modifiers that modify the noun are diagrammed in the usual way below the noun. Leave that up for a minute or two. Well, maybe not quite a minute. And that basically is how to diagram participles and participial phrases. Thank you for your time. God bless you.